The transport shuttle touched down on forward operating base Sigma-7 with a hiss of hydraulics and a cloud of red dust. General Vakthor emerged from the craft, his forearms clasped behind his back in the traditional Krillian military posture. He stood 9 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming dark purple in the harsh sunlight of Kreshtar. Behind him, his adjutants scrambled to keep pace as he strode toward the base commander's office. Vakthor had inspected 47 military installations in his 30-year career. He expected nothing different here. The coalition forces would stand at attention. He would review their readiness, offer corrections, and move on. Simple, efficient. The way military operations should be. Colonel Threndax met him at the entrance, all 6 of his Threxian legs moving in perfect synchronization as he saluted. The base commander's scales were scarred from decades of combat, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a veteran warrior. "General Vakthor, welcome to Sigma-7, Threndax said, his translator implant rendering his clicking language into Galactic Standard. "The troops are assembled for inspection." "Excellent, let us begin." The parade ground was packed with soldiers from a dozen species. Vakthor walked slowly down the rows, his experienced eyes catching every detail. A Gorthek with improperly maintained armor plating. A Velnari whose weapon showed signs of neglect. He made mental notes, but these were minor infractions. Overall, the base appeared combat-ready. Then he reached the 3rd platoon. Most of the soldiers stood at perfect attention, but one figure near the end of the line caught his eye. The creature was small compared to the others, barely 6 feet tall. It had only 2 arms and 2 legs, and its skin was a strange peachy pink color, completely unarmored by nature. The being was sweating heavily, droplets running down its face, despite the relatively cool morning temperature. Vakthor stopped. He walked closer, his superior height allowing him to loom over the small soldier. The creature's chest rose and fell rapidly, as if the simple act of standing required enormous effort. "You there," Vakthor said, his voice cutting through the silence. "Step forward." The soldier moved forward with crisp precision, despite the apparent physical strain. Up close, Vakthor could see more details. The being wore the standard coalition combat uniform, but it looked almost comical on such a diminutive frame. The soldier's eyes were a strange brown color, wet and soft-looking, lacking the protective membranes of proper warrior species. "What is wrong with you, soldier? Are you ill?" "No, sir," the creature replied. Its voice was surprisingly steady. "Then why are you sweating like a Banthrian in molt? Why are you breathing so heavily? We have been standing here for less than 10 minutes. "This is normal for my species, sir." Vakthor's mandibles clicked in disbelief. Normal? This pathetic display was normal? He turned to Colonel Threndax, who had followed at a respectful distance. "Colonel, why is this soldier in such poor physical condition? Has it been cleared by medical?" Threndax opened his mouth to respond, but Vakthor had already turned back to the soldier. "What is your designation?" "Private First Class Chen, sir. Service number 77492 Delta." "And your species?" "Human, sir." The word meant nothing to Vakthor. In 3 decades of military service across 70 star systems, he had never encountered a human. This species was clearly not among the warrior races of the galaxy. "Human," Vakthor repeated, letting his disdain color the word. "Tell me, Private Chen, how did your species convince the Coalition to accept you into military service? What possible use could such a fragile creature be in combat?" Several soldiers in the formation shifted uncomfortably. Vakthor noticed a Gorthek 2 positions down wince visibly. "Good. Let them understand that standards existed for a reason." "I serve to the best of my ability, sir," Chen said simply. "Your best," Vakthor walked in a slow circle around the human. Look at you. You have no natural armor, no protective scales or exoskeleton. Your skin is thin enough to see the blood vessels beneath. You have only 2 arms, limiting your combat effectiveness by half compared to a proper warrior. You become exhausted from simply standing still. He stopped directly in front of Chen, bending down slightly to bring his face level with the humans. Tell me truthfully, Private, in actual combat, against a real enemy, how long would you survive? 5 minutes? 2? Would you simply collapse from the effort of carrying your weapon? I would fight until the mission was complete, or I was unable to continue, sir. The answer was delivered without emotion, without pride or anger, just a simple statement of fact. Somehow this irritated Vakthor more than defiance would have. Unable to continue, the general repeated mockingly. A diplomatic way of saying, until I died quickly and uselessly. He straightened to his full height. Private Chen, you are reassigned to remedial physical training. 2 hours every morning before standard duties. 2 hours every evening after. Perhaps we can bring you up to minimum acceptable standards, though I have my doubts. Yes, sir. Dismissed. Return to formation. Chen stepped back into line with the same crisp precision as before. Vakthor moved on, continuing his inspection, but his mood had soured. How had coalition standards fallen so far? Allowing such obviously inadequate creatures into military service endangered everyone. When combat came, that human would be a liability. Someone stronger soldiers would have to protect, instead of a warrior who could hold the line. He completed the inspection in silence, offered a few perfunctory comments to Colonel Frendax, and dismissed the formation. As the soldiers dispersed, Vakthor noticed something odd. Several of the more experienced troops, veterans with multiple campaign ribbons on their uniforms, had gathered around Private Chen. They were speaking in low voices, too quiet for his translator to catch. The Gorthek from Chen's row clapped the human on the shoulder with one massive hand. The gesture looked friendly, almost protective. A Velnari pilot said something that made Chen's mouth curve upward in what Vakthor recognized as a smile. Strange. Why would seasoned warriors show such camaraderie towards someone so obviously weak? As Vakthor turned to leave the parade ground, he passed close enough to overhear a Threxian sergeant speaking to another soldier. The general doesn't know, the sergeant said quietly. Should someone tell him? The other replied. Would you want to be the one to explain? Let him figure it out himself. Vakthor paused, considering whether to demand an explanation, but decided against it. It meant nothing. He had more important matters to attend to than one weak human who would likely wash out of service within a year. General Vakthor settled into the guest quarters assigned to him, reviewing supply manifests on his data tablet. The inspection had gone well overall, despite the disturbing presence of that inadequate human soldier. He made a note to recommend stricter species requirements for frontline postings. A chime at his door interrupted his work. Enter, he commanded. Colonel Frendax stepped inside, moving with unusual hesitation. The Threxian scales had shifted to a darker shade, a sign of stress among his species. General, I hoped we might speak informally, if you have time. Vakthor gestured to a seat. Of course, Colonel. Your base runs efficiently. I have few criticisms. Thank you, sir. Threndax settled onto the specialized furniture designed for his multi-legged anatomy. I wanted to discuss the incident during inspection. Private Chen. Yes, the human. I have assigned appropriate remedial training. With rigorous conditioning, perhaps the creature can be brought up to barely acceptable standards. Threndax made a sound his translator rendered as a sigh. General, with respect, you have made a significant mistake. Vakthor's mandibles clicked sharply. Explain. Private Chen is not weak. Humans are not weak. In fact, they are among the most dangerous soldiers in the coalition. For a moment, Vakthor thought he had misheard. Then he laughed, a harsh chittering sound. Colonel, I appreciate loyalty to your troops, but I have eyes. I saw that creature sweating from the simple effort of standing still. I observed its lack of natural defenses, its pathetic physical form. If that is dangerous, then I am a Banthrian nursemaid. General, please, allow me to show you something. Threndax activated a holographic display. Combat footage appeared, grainy and marked with Coalition security classifications. The video showed a battlefield, smoke and plasma fire obscuring the scene. The timestamp indicated it was from a mission 8 months prior. This is footage from the Carthex Prime campaign, Threndax explained. Watch the soldier in the center. Vakthor leaned forward, a human soldier, gender indeterminate in full combat armor, advanced through withering enemy fire. The soldier moved with purpose, but not exceptional speed. Standard combat movement, nothing impressive. Then the human took a hit. A plasma bolt struck their left side, burning through armor. Any other species would have fallen. The human staggered, dropped to one knee, then stood up and continued advancing. Body armor absorbed most of it, Vakthor said dismissively. Keep watching. The human took 2 more hits, then 4 more. Pieces of armor fell away, revealing burns and wounds beneath. The soldier was clearly injured, severely so, but they kept moving forward. Why has no one pulled that soldier back for medical treatment? Vakthor demanded. The human refused evacuation, Threndax said quietly. This was a critical choke point. Someone needed to hold it for 17 minutes while civilians evacuated. The human volunteered. On the screen, the soldier finally collapsed after the 16th minute. Enemy forces rushed forward, thinking the position abandoned. Then the human stood up again, weapon firing. Vakthor watched in growing disbelief as the soldier held the line for another 3 minutes before reinforcements arrived. That human had 17 separate wounds requiring surgical intervention, Threndax said. Broken ribs, a punctured lung, severe burns covering 30% of their body. They should have been unconscious from pain and blood loss. Instead, they completed the mission. An anomaly, Vakthor said, but his voice lacked conviction. One exceptionally stubborn individual. Then watch this. More footage appeared. Different battlefield, different human, same result. A soldier fighting long past the point when biology should have shut down their body. Then another clip, and another. How many of these do you have? Vakthor asked. Hundreds. General, this is not anomalous behavior. This is standard for humans. They possess a biological trait their scientists call adrenaline response. When threatened, their bodies flood with natural combat stimulants. They become faster, stronger, and their pain receptors partially shut down. They can function with injuries that would kill most species. Vakthor's certainty began to crack. Their physiology allows this? More than allows, requires. General, humans evolved on what xenobiologists classify as a Class 12 death world. Class 12? Vakthor's translator almost failed to process his shock. That is impossible. Nothing sapient evolves on a Class 12. The environmental pressures are too extreme, and yet humans did. Threndax pulled up another file. Their homeworld, Terra, is a nightmare by galactic standards. Gravity 30% higher than standard. Atmosphere containing poisonous oxygen at lethal concentrations for most species. Native predators that hunt in coordinated packs. Plant life that evolved chemical warfare. Diseases, parasites, weather systems capable of destroying cities. Humans survived this? Not just survived, thrived. They became the dominant species by developing the most terrifying hunting strategy in the known galaxy. Do you know how humans hunted, General? Vakthor shook his head slowly. They chased their prey, for hours, sometimes days. Human ancestors would identify an animal and simply follow it. Not quickly. Humans are not fast runners by galactic standards, but they never stopped. They tracked their prey across endless distances until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. Then, they killed it. Persistence predation, Vakthor whispered. He had studied it in xenobiology courses, but only as a theoretical concept. No known sapient species actually employed such a brutal strategy. Exactly. And that trait remains in them. You saw Private Chen struggling during inspection. You interpreted it as weakness. But that human can maintain that pace for hours, days if necessary. They will not stop. They cannot stop. It is coded into every cell of their body. A knock at the door interrupted them. A Velnari pilot entered, her feathers ruffled with agitation. "Colonel, I heard the general questioned Private Chen. I wanted to—" "Lieutenant Sarix, please, come in. The general is learning about humans." The pilot turned her large eyes toward Vakthor. "General, I flew missions with a human co-pilot for 2 years. I am alive because of her. We were shot down behind enemy lines on Vortha 4. I had a broken wing and could not fly. We were 100 kilometers from friendly territory." "How did you escape?" Vakthor asked. "My co-pilot carried me. For 3 days. She carried my weight, walked 100 kilometers through hostile territory on a broken ankle. I heard the bone grinding with every step. I begged her to leave me. She refused. When we finally reached coalition lines, she collapsed. The medics said her body had been eating its own muscle tissue for energy. She should have died on the 2nd day. But she did not. No, sir. She recovered in 2 weeks and requested to return to flight duty. That is what humans do." More officers arrived, each with similar stories. A Gorthek medic who had treated human soldiers. A communications specialist who had monitored human units in combat. A logistics officer who explained that human ration requirements were bizarre because they could survive on almost anything organic, even foods toxic to other species. Vakthor listened to it all, his certainty crumbling. "Why does no one speak of this?" he demanded. "Why are humans not celebrated as elite warriors?" Threndax's scales darkened further. "Because, General, humans are too willing to die. They volunteer for suicide missions at rates that terrify command staff. 60% of Coalition Medal of Valor recipients are human. Their casualty rates are the highest in the military, not because they are weak, but because they refuse to retreat even when ordered. We protect information about human capabilities, because if enemies knew how dangerous they were, humans would be targeted for elimination." Vakthor sat in silence, processing this information. Finally, he spoke. "I have humiliated Private Chen publicly. I have assigned them to remedial training as punishment for my own ignorance." "Yes, sir, you have. What should I do?" "I would suggest," Threndax said carefully, "that you observe the training you ordered. Watch how a human responds to your challenge. Then decide." Vakthor nodded slowly. Tomorrow, he would watch. The training ground behind Forward Operating Base Sigma 7 consisted of packed red earth and a course that wound through rocky terrain for 20 kilometers. General Vakthor arrived before dawn, accompanied by several officers who had heard about his plans. Word had spread quickly through the base. Private Chen was already there, stretching in the pre-dawn darkness. The human moved through a series of movements that looked almost ritualistic, bending and twisting their inadequate body in preparation. "Private Chen," Vakthor announced himself. The human stopped and saluted. "General, I have decided to personally oversee your remedial training. We will begin with a simple exercise, a 20-kilometer rock march in full combat gear, followed by combat drills. This is a standard morning routine for Krillian soldiers. Can you complete it?" Shen's face showed no expression. "Yes, sir." "Gear up." Vakthor had already donned his own combat pack, loaded to Krillian military specifications. 70 pounds of equipment, weapons, and supplies. He watched as Chen put on a similar pack, the weight clearly straining that small frame. "We begin now," Vakthor said, and started walking at a Krillian patrol pace. For the first kilometer, everything went as expected. Vakthor moved with easy efficiency, his forelegs and powerful physiology making the trek simple. Behind him, Chen followed, already breathing hard. The human's pace was slower, each step deliberate. "You must move faster, Private," Vakthor called back. "In combat, the enemy will not wait for you to catch your breath." "Yes, sir," Chen responded, but did not increase speed. Vakthor completed the first 5 kilometers in 40 minutes. He paused at the checkpoint, barely winded, and waited. Chen arrived 6 minutes later, face flushed, clothing soaked with sweat. "You are falling behind," Vakthor observed. "Yes, sir." "Do you wish to quit?" "No, sir." "Then let us continue." They moved on. The sun rose, heating the desert air. Vakthor maintained his steady pace, occasionally checking behind him. Chen was always there, always exactly 6 minutes behind, never catching up, but never falling further back either. This pattern continued for another 5 kilometers. Then Vakthor noticed something that made his mandibles click in confusion. His own pace had slowed slightly. The terrain was becoming rougher, rockier. His breathing had increased, not much, but noticeably. He was experiencing the first whispers of fatigue. Chen arrived at the 10-kilometer mark, exactly 6 minutes after him. Still sweating heavily, still breathing hard, but those brown eyes were focused, alert. The human showed no signs of slowing down. "How do you feel, Private?" Vakthor asked. "Fine, sir." "You are clearly exhausted." "This is normal, sir." That phrase again, normal. Vakthor studied the human more carefully. Chen's chest rose and fell rapidly, yes. Sweat dripped from their face and arms, yes. But the human's hands were steady. Their stance was solid. Despite the apparent distress, there was no actual degradation in performance. "Continue," Vakthor ordered. The second half of the march was harder. The terrain climbed upward through rocky hills. Vakthor's breathing became labored. His leg muscles began to burn with accumulated acid. This was still within normal parameters for a Krillian warrior, but it was no longer easy. Chen maintained that same pace. 6 minutes behind. Always 6 minutes behind. At the 15-kilometer mark, Vakthor had to stop and rest for 3 minutes. His physiology demanded it. He drank from his water supply and checked his pack straps, using the pause to recover. Chen arrived, stopped in the same spot, and also drank. The human's hands shook slightly as they raised the water bottle. "You are in pain," Vakthor observed. It was not a question. "Yes, sir." "Significant pain?" "Yes, sir." "But you continue anyway." "Yes, sir." "Why?" Chen looked at him with those strange wet eyes. "Because the march is not finished, sir." Vakthor felt something cold settle in his gut. This was not courage or determination as he understood it. This was something else entirely. Something that did not calculate cost, did not measure suffering against gain. This human would simply continue until the task was complete, or their body failed completely. "Let us finish this," Vakthor said quietly. The final 5 kilometers tested the limits of Vakthor's endurance. He pushed through it, with the discipline of 3 decades of military service. But when he finally reached the endpoint, he needed several minutes to recover. His breathing was harsh, his muscles trembling slightly. 6 minutes later, Chen arrived. The human looked worse than before. They were no longer just sweating, but dripping, as if someone had poured water over them. Their breathing sounded painful, harsh gasps that Vakthor's translator could barely process. Chen's legs shook visibly, but they had arrived, on time, at exactly the same interval as every other checkpoint. 20 kilometers complete, Vakthor announced. Prepare for combat drills. Chen simply nodded. What followed horrified the watching officers. Vakthor, determined to find this human's breaking point, ordered drill after drill. Weapon assembly and disassembly, tactical movements, combat positions that required holding painful stances for extended periods. Chen performed adequately, not brilliantly, not with the fluid grace of a Krillian warrior, but adequately. And that was wrong. The human should be collapsing, should be begging for rest, should be failing. Instead, they just continued. Vakthor increased the difficulty. He added weight to Chen's pack, extended the drill time, introduced stress scenarios with simulated enemy fire. The human stumbled, failed some exercises, fell during others, and kept getting back up. There was something in Chen's eyes now that Vakthor recognized from ancient battlefields, from the most desperate moments of his longest campaigns. It was the look of a being that had stopped thinking, stopped feeling, stopped calculating odds. A being running on pure instinct, and that instinct said only one thing: survive. After 8 hours of continuous training, Colonel Frendax approached with 2 medical staff. "General, this must stop," the colonel said firmly. "We are not finished," Vakthor replied, unable to look away from Chen. "General, look at the medical readings." Frendax held up a scanner. Private Chen is experiencing severe dehydration, muscle damage, and early signs of system failure. If this continues, they will die. "Then they should quit," Vakthor said. "They will not quit," a Gorthek medic interjected. "That is what I have been trying to explain to you. Humans cannot quit. It is not in their nature. They will continue until they literally die. You must order them to stop." Vakthor looked at Chen. The human had fallen to their knees, but was trying to stand again. "Private Chen," Vakthor said, his voice rough. "Report to medical immediately." Chen stood, swaying. "Yes, sir." The medics rushed forward to support the human. As they led Chen away, Vakthor heard one medic speaking to the other. Typical human. They would have continued until complete system shutdown. That is what they do. That is what they always do. Vakthor stood alone on the training ground as the sun began to set, staring at his own hands. He had tested himself today, pushed his own limits to force a human to break. He had not broken them. He had only discovered that they had no breaking point at all. The realization terrified him. The alarm screamed through forward operating base Sigma 7 at 0:47 hours. General Vakthor rolled from his bunk instantly. Decades of combat experience overriding the need for full consciousness. His translator picked up the automated warning. Perimeter breach. Hostile forces. All personnel to combat stations. Scarith Raiders. Vakthor recognized their signature plasma signatures on his tactical display before he even reached the command center. The pirate clans had been growing bolder in this sector, but attacking a coalition base directly was unprecedented. Colonel Frendax was already coordinating the defense, his 6 legs moving rapidly between control stations. "Report," Vakthor commanded. "They hit us during shift change, General. Someone fed them our duty rosters. 3 breaches in the perimeter, approximately 200 hostiles. They are pushing hard toward the barracks and medical facilities." "They want hostages," Vakthor said grimly. "We cannot allow them to reach those areas. I am taking direct command. Give me 3rd and 5th platoons." "Sir, 3rd platoon includes—" "I know what 3rd platoon includes, Colonel. Deploy them." Vakthor armed himself and moved toward the heaviest fighting. The Scarith were vicious opponents, 7-foot-tall reptilians with natural armor plating and a complete disregard for their own casualties. They fought with the frenzy of creatures who valued plunder over survival. The general met them in the central corridor leading to the barracks. His 4 arms moved with practiced precision, each wielding a weapon: plasma rifle, particle blade, concussion grenades. A Krillian warrior was a terror in close combat, and Vakthor had not earned his rank through politics. He cut through the first wave of Scarith with efficient brutality. Behind him, coalition soldiers formed defensive positions, laying down covering fire. This was what Vakthor understood. Clear objectives, defined enemies, straightforward tactics. But the Scarith had numbers and surprise on their side. For every raider that fell, 2 more seemed to pour through the breaches. Vakthor's tactical display showed red enemy markers spreading through the base like a virus. "General," Threndex's voice crackled through his comm. "Medical sector has gone dark. No communications." "How many wounded were in medical?" 37, sir. Including, Threndex paused, including Private Chen. They were still being treated from today's training. Vakthor felt something cold grip his chest. The human had been barely conscious when the medics had taken them away. If the Scarith reached medical, everyone there would be defenseless. "I am moving to medical," Vakthor announced. "Hold the other sectors." "Sir, you cannot." "Hold the other sectors, Colonel. That is an order." Vakthor fought his way through 2 more groups of raiders. The path to medical was choked with enemies, all pushing toward the same objective. These were not random attacks. The Scarith knew exactly where the vulnerable targets were located. As he approached the medical sector, the sounds of combat changed. The organized chaos of the battle gave way to something else. Sporadic gunfire. Screams that were cut short. Then an eerie silence. Vakthor expected to find the sector overrun, the wounded executed or captured. Instead, he found a killing field. Scarith bodies were piled in the corridors. Some had been shot with precision marksmanship, single rounds through vital areas. Others showed signs of close combat, wounds from improvised weapons. Medical equipment turned into clubs and spears. And several, disturbingly, showed injuries consistent with hand-to-hand combat. Broken necks, crushed skulls, damage inflicted by someone strong enough and desperate enough to use their own body as a weapon. In the center of this carnage, Vakthor found Private Chen. The human was barely recognizable. They wore only the light medical gown they had been recovering in, now soaked with blood. Their left arm hung at an awkward angle, clearly broken. Burns and cuts covered their exposed skin, fresh wounds layered over the injuries from training. Chen held a broken rifle in their functioning hand, using it like a club. 3 Scarith raiders faced them, circling cautiously. Behind the human, Vakthor could see the medical bay doors, still sealed. The wounded were safe behind those doors, because this human had not let anyone pass. One of the Scarith lunged. Chen moved with a speed that seemed impossible, given their injuries. The broken rifle connected with the raider's skull with a wet crack. The Scarith fell, and Chen turned immediately to face the next threat. The human was swaying on their feet, clearly near collapse. But there was something in their stance, in the way they positioned themselves between the raiders and the medical bay, that froze Vakthor in place. This was not a soldier following orders. This was not even a conscious decision. This was instinct. Pure animal instinct. The same instinct that had driven human ancestors to chase prey across endless plains. The same instinct that refused to acknowledge when the hunt was lost. Chen would not move, could not move, would die right here rather than let these enemies pass. The second raider attacked from the side. Chen turned too slowly, that broken arm preventing proper defense. The Scarith's blade sliced across the human's ribs, opening a long cut. Chen made a sound, something between a grunt and a scream, but did not fall. Instead, the human stepped forward into the attack, inside the raider's guard, and slammed their forehead into the Scarith's face. The raider stumbled back, and Chen followed, striking with the rifle, with fists, with anything available. The third raider tried to circle around, to reach the medical bay, while Chen was occupied. This was tactical thinking, logical, efficient. Chen threw the broken rifle. The weapon tumbled end over end, striking the raider in the center of mass. Not enough to kill, but enough to stop them. And in that moment, Chen closed the distance, moving with a lurching run that should not have been possible. What happened next, Vakthor would later struggle to describe in his official report. The human fought without technique, without training, without any regard for their own survival. They used their injuries as weapons, turning pain into fuel. When the raider struck Chen's broken arm, the human screamed, but used the momentum to drive their knee into the raider's midsection. It was horrible, brutal, effective. The last raider fell, and Chen collapsed on top of the body. Vakthor rushed forward, calling for medics over his comm. He rolled Chen onto their back. The human's eyes were open, but unfocused. Their breathing was shallow and rapid. "Private Chen," Vakthor said, "the sector is secure. You can rest now." Chen's eyes found his face, those strange brown eyes, wet with pain and exhaustion. "Wounded," Chen whispered. "Behind the doors. 37. Safe?" "Yes, Private. They are safe. You held the line." "Good." Chen's eyes started to close. "Stay awake, Private. Medical is coming." "How long?" Chen asked. "How long what?" "How long did I hold?" 23 minutes. Chen's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. New record. Then the human finally lost consciousness. Medics arrived within minutes. They stabilized Chen and transported them to the main medical facility, listing off injuries in clinical terms that made Vakthor's mandibles click in horror. Broken arm, 3 broken ribs, severe lacerations, second-degree burns, massive blood loss, muscle damage, concussion. "Will they survive?" Vakthor asked. The Gorthek medic looked at him with an expression that might have been amusement. "General, this is a human. They will be back on light duty within a week." Vakthor walked through the medical sector, looking at the bodies Chen had left behind. He counted 14 dead Scarith, 14 enemies killed by one wounded, barely conscious human who should have been helpless. The medical bay doors opened. The wounded soldiers inside had heard the battle, had known someone was fighting for them. They looked at Vakthor with questions in their eyes. "Private Chen held the line," Vakthor announced. "Every one of you is alive because a human refused to let the enemy pass." One of the wounded, a young Velnari, spoke up. "We heard the fighting. It sounded like an entire platoon was out there." "It was one soldier," Vakthor said quietly. "One human." He left them and returned to the command center. The battle was winding down, the Scarith forces retreating with heavy casualties. Coalition victory, though at significant cost. Colonel Threndax met him with a full damage report, but Vakthor held up a hand. "First, tell me about Chen. Complete medical status." "Critical but stable. The medics say recovery will take 3 days, possibly 4. "Days?" Vakthor's translator almost failed him. "With those injuries?" "Human healing factor, General. I tried to tell you." Vakthor sat down heavily. "Colonel, I owe that human an apology. I owe them my respect. I owe them recognition for what they did here tonight." "Yes, sir, you do." "How do I apologize to someone for judging them so completely wrong?" Threndax's scales shifted to a thoughtful pattern. "Perhaps start by being honest. Humans value honesty above almost everything else." Vakthor nodded slowly. He would wait for Chen to wake, and then he would learn another lesson in humility. General Vakthor sat beside Private Chen's medical bed for 3 hours before the human finally stirred. He had reviewed the combat footage 17 times, read the medical reports until he had them memorized, and rehearsed what he wanted to say. None of his preparation mattered when those brown eyes opened and focused on him. "General," Chen said, their voice rough and dry. "Private Chen, please do not try to sit up. You are still recovering." "How long was I unconscious?" 57 hours. Chen absorbed this information with a slight nod. "The wounded from medical sector, did everyone survive?" "All 37, because of you." "And the base?" "Secure. The Scarith retreated with 70% casualties. They will not attack us again soon." Vakthor paused. "Private, I must speak with you about several matters. Do you feel well enough for conversation?" "Yes, sir." Vakthor stood and walked to the window, looking out at the red landscape of Kreshtar. He found it easier to speak without looking directly at the human. "I have been a soldier for 30 years, he began. "I have commanded troops from dozens of species. I have studied military history and tactics from 100 worlds. I believed I understood warfare. I believed I understood what made a warrior." He turned back to face Chen. "I was wrong, and my ignorance led me to treat you with disrespect and cruelty. For this, I apologize." Chen's expression did not change. "Apology accepted, sir." "That is all? You do not wish to make me understand the depth of my error?" "No, sir. You already understand. That is why you are here." The simple honesty of it struck Vakthor like a physical blow. No anger, no demand for recognition, just acceptance. "Why did you never correct me?" Vakthor asked. "When I mocked you during inspection, when I assigned you to remedial training, you could have explained what humans are capable of." Chen shifted slightly in the bed, wincing at the movement. "Would you have believed me, General? Or would you have thought I was making excuses?" "I would not have believed you." "Then there was no point in explaining. Actions speak louder than words. It is something humans say." Vakthor returned to his chair. "I have spent the past 2 days learning about your species. About Terra and the nightmarish conditions that shaped you. About persistence, predation, and your body's ability to function past the point of what other species consider biological failure. But none of that explains what I saw in the medical sector." "What did you see, General?" "I saw a soldier who should have been helpless, who was injured, exhausted, barely conscious. I saw that soldier kill 14 enemies and protect 37 wounded comrades for 23 minutes. Vakthor leaned forward. "I saw something that terrified me, Private Chen. I saw someone who would have continued fighting until they died. Not out of duty, not out of orders, but because stopping was not an option their body would accept." Chen was quiet for a moment. "My species has a saying, General. It is not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. Do you understand what that means?" "I am not familiar with dogs. They are animals from Terra, small compared to many predators, but fierce when protecting what matters to them." Chen met his eyes. "You looked at me during inspection and saw weakness because I struggled with your standard drills. Because I sweat and breathe hard and look fragile compared to Krillian warriors. Yes. But those drills were designed for species that evolved on kind worlds. Worlds with reasonable gravity, gentle climates, and prey that did not fight back. My people evolved in hell, General. We do not look strong because we save our strength for when it matters, for enduring the impossible and surviving the unsurvivable." "That is not weakness," Vakthor said quietly. "No, sir. That is efficiency." A medical technician entered to check Chen's vital signs. Vakthor waited while they worked, noting with amazement that the human's readings were already improving. Injuries that would have required weeks of recovery for a Krillian were healing in days. When they were alone again, Vakthor spoke carefully. "Private Chen, I would like to make you an offer. I command an elite strike unit, Task Force Obsidian. We handle the Coalition's most difficult operations. I would like to request your transfer to my direct command." Chen's eyes widened slightly, the first sign of surprise Vakthor had seen from them. "Sir, I am a mediocre soldier by human standards. There are others far more skilled, more experienced. I do not want skill, Vakthor interrupted. I have skilled soldiers. I want what you showed me in that medical corridor. I want someone who will hold the line, no matter what. Someone who teaches by example what true endurance means. I would be honored, sir, but I have one condition. Name it. Stop looking at soldiers and seeing their limitations. Start seeing their potential. My people have another saying. Different is not deficient. Every species brings something unique to warfare. Krillians bring strength and discipline. Valnari bring precision and aerial supremacy. Gorthaks bring resilience. Humans bring endurance. All are necessary. Vakthor felt his mandibles click in what might have been the Krillian equivalent of a smile. You are correct, Private Chen. I have been guilty of believing my way is the only way. That Krillian military doctrine is superior to all others. You have shown me the arrogance of that belief. Not arrogance, sir. Just incomplete understanding. Over the following weeks, as Chen recovered and began training with Task Force Obsidian, Vakthor implemented sweeping changes to his command. He studied the tactical doctrines of other species, looking for strengths instead of weaknesses. He learned that Valnari could process battlefield information faster than any other species, that Threxians could operate in complete darkness using sensory organs Krillians lacked, that Gorthaks could survive in toxic atmospheres without protection. And he learned about humans. He learned they could function on 4 hours of sleep, while other species required 8. That their binocular vision gave them superior depth perception. That their hands, so much weaker than his four-armed grip, possessed fine motor control that allowed for intricate work his people could never manage. He learned that humans volunteered for the most dangerous missions at rates that horrified other species. That they had to be ordered not to sacrifice themselves. That 60% of the Coalition's highest valor awards went to humans, not because they were the most numerous species, but because they simply would not quit. 6 months after the Scarith attack, Task Force Obsidian had become the Coalition's most effective unit. They combined Krillian shock assault tactics with human endurance operations. They used Valnari air support, coordinated with Gorthak heavy armor. They stopped thinking in terms of species limitations and started thinking in terms of combined strengths. Chen had been promoted twice, and now served as Vakthor's senior tactical advisor. The humans still struggled with standard physical drills, still sweated heavily, still appeared fragile next to the larger species. And Vakthor had learned to see past appearances. On the anniversary of the medical sector battle, Vakthor called Chen to his office. He had something he wanted to show them. I have been writing my memoirs, he explained. A Krillian military tradition. We document our battles so future generations can learn from them. That sounds like a valuable tradition, sir. I wrote a chapter about you, about what you taught me. I wanted your permission before I included it. He handed Chen a datapad. The human read in silence, their expression unreadable. When they finished, they looked up with those strange wet eyes that Vakthor had learned could be bright with unshed tears. You wrote, I once mocked a warrior for appearing weak. I learned that humans do not appear strong. They simply are when strength is needed. This is the difference between warriors who train for war and warriors who evolved from it. Is it accurate? Yes, sir, it is very accurate. Then I will include it. Perhaps other commanders can learn from my mistakes without having to make them first. Chen stood to leave, then paused at the door. General, may I ask a question? Always, Private. If you could go back to that inspection on the parade ground, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently? Vakthor considered this carefully. I would still have noticed you struggling. I would still have seen you sweating and breathing hard. But instead of assuming you were weak, I would have asked myself why you were struggling. I would have remembered that different is not deficient, and I would have learned your strength before judging your weakness. After the human left, Vakthor returned to his writing. He had many more chapters to complete, many more lessons to document. But the chapter about Private Chen would remain the most important. It was the chapter about the day he learned that true strength is not in how powerful you appear, but in how far you will go when everything depends on you. It was the chapter about discovering that the smallest soldier can cast the longest shadow. It was the chapter about humanity.